Hello, so I'm Donna from Maverick Television. I'm the head of post-production and facilities, and I work alongside our head of production and all the production teams, both in our Birmingham office and our London office. And I get involved with right at the start when we're looking at putting budgets together, post-production budgets for all our new commissions, to camera choices, setting up the teams going out on location, right the way through post-production and into delivery. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about embarrassing bodies in general, which is very much a case study for this particular series. Now, it's by no means a definitive workflow. Every single production that we have, every single series, we treat very separately. We look at that production and we look at what the needs are against that production. So, as I say, not definitive, but I thought it'd be really helpful to just go through one series, a big series for us actually, and it's the first one that we've been doing tapeless and HD for embarrassing bodies. But before I start on the case study, I thought I'd talk through a little bit about why Maverick decided to go down the tapeless route. And it was basically because we had no choice, although it has worked really, really well for us. Up until about a year ago, Maverick were predominantly DV cam, maybe a little bit of digibeta, all standard definition. And then from about September last year, broadcasters started commissioning high definition. And Maverick had never done high definition before, so it wasn't like we were going from shooting HD cam to going tapeless HD. We made the leap from standard definition to high definition in one foul swoop, and we were told from broadcasters that there was no extra uplift for that. So we were expected to deliver high definition for a standard definition budget. So we had no extra money. We had to get to grips with new technology, but also we had the issue where a lot of our content is self-shot by our shooting producer directors, and so not only did we not have the budget to go for big cameras, but also we couldn't logistically get away with big cameras. We needed cameras that producers are used to going out with the Z1 or at very most maybe a DSR 450, and so we needed cameras that were small enough for the producers to go out and shoot with, and for that reason tapeless was our only way forward. But I will talk it through, as I say, on the back of an embarrassing bodies case study. And what I will do alongside that is just throw in a couple of tips along the way of lessons that we've learned. So, my first tip is to plan. Plan your workflow right at the start, and just do this as early as you possibly can. So, when we get a commission, or we're just at the budgeting stage of trying to get a commission for sign-off, we try to, at this point, we're getting our budget right, and we're thinking through, everything that we need to budget for. And to be honest, putting a workflow together as early as you possibly can really helps with that budgeting process. Your camera choices as well, you may find will affect your recruitment. So we've been in a situation where we recruited our producer directors or our maybe shooting APs for a Sky production, and then we realised quite quickly that because Sky won't accept the same cameras that maybe the BBC and ITV accept, that the people that we'd recruited to go out and shoot couldn't operate the larger cameras which Sky need us to use to meet their minimum spec. So it's really important to kind of almost know what you're doing before you even go and recruit people. And one thing that Mark will talk about a little bit later is actually how the roles may change a little bit in your tapeless shoots anyway, and the people that you want to put on location if you're having to do some downloading on location. Get camera approval from your broadcaster. So I've just mentioned there that Sky do have a different delivery spec to BBC, ITV, Channel 4, and so it's really, really important to make sure that every new series you're absolutely sure what your broadcaster will accept as high definition. Sometimes, even Channel 4, even though they say they accept a particular camera, even then it will probably come down to the genre as to whether or not they'll let you use it. So always go back to your commissioner or your technical contact at your channel and double check the cameras are approved by them. Get all parties involved, I would say, really, really critical actually, just to get even your tail end, your post-production involved right at the very, very start. As you'll see as we go through the workflow, it's a lot of decisions are made up front. There's a lot of technical implications for the post-production teams later on in production if you don't really consider those things before you go out on your shoot. And then finally, get your insurer's approval. And that's got a lot better, I would say, over the last 6 months. I mean, I know a year ago, I approached insurance companies and said, what are your procedures for shooting tapeless? And I'd kind of get, well, don't really know, really, just have as many copies of everything as you possibly can, which it's not really that practical, and it's a bit wishy-washy. And for us, we didn't want to have loads and loads of copies of our very sensitive media. So I think that they are getting a little bit closer to having, set guidelines as to what they expect. So definitely check that you're meeting their requirements. So I'm going to show you the workflow that we use or have chosen to adopt for Embarrassing Bodies. So this is what I draw up at the start of every production, and it's a big part of kind of getting everything written down. I send this to our insurance company to say this is the procedure we're going through, and when we have our startup meetings, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, it's a way of just distributing this around the production team. And anyone who wants a copy of this, I can give you this afterwards if you want it. So we have 2 different streams here, as you can see, and this is because we have, in our budget, we do have some days where we can afford to have crew on location. And for those days, we have the money for cameramen and we have the money for slightly more expensive cameras. And so the decision we made on this series, and in fact, all of the crew days that we do, is we shoot XT cam on a PDW 700 or we've used the F800. And what is lovely about this is that we're shooting to disc. So for everybody that was new to shooting tapeless, what was lovely is that they got this to kind of take away off location, just like they would tape. They number it like they would tape. There's no faffing around on location. There's all the benefits that you can get in post-production being file-based, but without that fear of having to press delete. So the teams go out. We get our settings right at the beginning. I'll talk about that in a second. We choose to shoot 45-minute discs, usually over 90 minutes. We don't want too much medium in one place, just in case somebody loses it. We label it as we would tape, and then we return this back to base as we would have done rushes. You can see a little thing on here, which is very specific to Embarrassing Bodies, because we do this slightly differently sometimes for some other productions, is that as you're shooting all your full-res media on here, you also have the option to shoot proxy, so low-res files, where it puts proxies on automatically. But you have the option to record it to these little sticks, which the benefit of that would be that you would be able to take that out of the camera, put it in your laptop with the relevant software, and be viewing your footage straight away. But as you can imagine, these tiny little things, if you can even see it, is going to hold really sensitive, it's going to hold your rushes, which, depending on what you're shooting, I mean, there's a certain element of commercial protection in that, but certainly in terms of, for us, our duty of care to our contributors and just data protection, we do not want our rushes to be on these tiny little sticks that we can't encrypt. They would be so easy to lose, and we do not want that getting in the wrong hands. So we ban these on certainly Embarrassing Bodies, but quite a lot of our other productions as well. Okay, so that's production on the crew. Then on the other hand, we've got our self-shooters, our producer directors and our APs that go out self-shooting. And we've chosen to use the Canon XF305 for all of that shooting, which is approved by Channel 4 as True HD. The reason we chose that camera is because we actually didn't really have a choice. Again, a real gap in the market at the moment for a small format camera that meets Channel 4's or most of the broadcasters' spec without an external device, which Emma's talked about and Chop will talk about later as well. They're great cameras for us, actually. We use it on pretty much everything we shoot at the moment, apart from stuff for Sky. One thing I would say right at the beginning, you'll see here how I've put the camera settings on here, which is really important. We shoot progressive on Embarrassing Bodies. We like that nice filmic look on this series. Now, in the past, when we've shot on Z1s, we haven't had the option to shoot progressive setting on those cameras. So we've always shot interlaced and fixed it in post-production. And the reason I've put this on here is something really, really important as part of the workflow, is that you won't actually meet HD spec if you apply that effect in post-production. So if you do want to have that nice filmic look, and once upon a time you would have shot interlaced, fixed it in post, run it through a film effect, you can't do that for HD delivery. And so therefore, if you want that nice progressive look, you do have to make that decision and get all your footage shot like that right from the offset. So that's why I mentioned that right at the top. You can hot swap your cards and the cameras. So a joy of tapeless for our teams is that you're no longer stopping to actually eject a tape and put another one in, which is brilliant on location. So when they shoot the cards, great thing about Canon, I have to say, is that it shoots to compact flash cards. There is a few downsides to shooting compact flash, but namely in that it's just a consumer format, but we've had very, very little problems, hardly any problems at all actually using these. So they shoot to compact flash. We choose to use the 32 gig. There are bigger cards than this out here that hold more media. What we don't really want to do though is have hours and hours on one little card. So we choose to stick to 32 gig, which shooting at 50 megabits gets us about 80 minutes of media. So the team go out, and as you can see, they're going out with Bob the Builder's lunchbox. Which I'll get to later why we do that. And because these cards are consumer, they cost, I'm saying this off the top of my head, probably about £90. Costs are coming down all the time. And so it's affordable, more so than if you're looking at the P2 or the S/S media that you can buy for Sony and Panasonic. So because of the affordability, we can afford to buy a lot more cards and use it a little bit more like tape. So what I mean by that is we can send a team out with what is in this box is 7 hours worth of recording time. And so if a team are going out for a day, and we don't want to send them out with a downloading kind of kit, which is very easy to download in the field, but it's just more pressure on your teams. So on Embarassing Bodies, we send them out with one case, which has got 7 hours of recordable media, more if they think they need it. They take it out, they shoot to it, and then they return it back to base, and we do everything else back in-house or back at post-production. So that's how we choose to work on Embarassing Bodies, so that the teams don't have that extra pressure on location. They go out with these little slips, which is really important. One thing when we moved to tapeless is that it's a whole change of mindset. And what we found was that production teams were going out, and even as much as the XD cam, just because it looks different, we were finding that people didn't label it in the way that they would have labelled a tape. And of course, it's a little bit more scary with the compact flash because you need to know what's on it. So we put little logs in the cases with, you know, what the clip numbers are and how many clips people are recording on the cards. So it's a very well thought out system in a way that we can get the information from the teams of what they're recording. The other thing I would say about this little system is that we found when people are going out with these that there's no tab on there to say if you've recorded on these cards or not, which you would get on Sony and Panasonic media. So we just have a little system here, really simple, but it works really well on location, where the teams go out with a little blank row at the top, and then we've got these little cases here. When they've shot, they just pop it in one of the cases, pop it there, and then when it comes back to the office, we can clearly see what they've shot on, and we can start getting it in the edit, because you don't want to be writing on these cards because you're constantly reusing them. So that's what that is. And then they return that to base. So basically they're going out, they're shooting on disc, or they're shooting on those, and they bring everything back to the office. As simple as we can possibly make it for everybody. Post-production, again, we try and keep it as simple as we possibly can. For Embarassing Bodies, we're actually doing all the post-production bar the grade in-house. So all the online audio offline in-house. So everything comes back to the office, whether it be on disk or compact flash. We copy all of those files onto a nearline storage drive for us, and we make a second copy from the original files onto LTO data tape. My props. So yes, ironically, we are going back onto tape, but it's a very cheap way of us keeping a long-term archive of our media should we have to, which we actually do quite often, have to go back and revisit. So it's a second copy, it's on tape, which makes everyone feel a little bit happier, and then we have our second copy on our nearline drive. And the reason I say that we make a copy from the original media, another lesson learned for us, is that we're using a very big post house in London. I won't mention names, but just to show you that even big post houses can make mistakes. We had somebody make a copy of our media, and then they made actually made 3 copies of that media, and they had 2 cards. And I'm going to say this because I'll show you how easy it is to make mistakes if you don't think out of system. So they had card A, they had card B. They put card A in, they made a copy. Then they made a second copy of that, they made a third copy of that. Then they put in card B, made a copy, and made a second copy, made a third copy. Deleted both cards. And then we realised that they'd actually made 6 copies of card A, no copies at all of card B, because they'd put the wrong card in twice. And so even though you're making lots and lots of copies and therefore you think it's safe, actually if you just make one little mistake right at the beginning and don't have that system right, you just could end up losing media, and we did. So I just thought I'd let you learn from that little lesson. And that's the importance of having. So what we've actually done on these forms is wrote down the clip numbers, so the start clip, the end clip, and that way when the person ingesting in post-production goes to put it in, they can even be checking that the clip numbers are exactly what it should be on the card. So it's just detail like that when you're thinking through your workflow. Okay, so we've now got 2 copies of our media. We actually don't always have a third copy of our media. Insurers only ask for 2 copies. Some people will tell you that you need 3 copies. We have 2. XD Cam is a little bit different. That's our third copy because we don't delete any of the media on those. That just sits on the shelf until the very end of production, and then we'll delete and reuse. But these cards here, we have 2 copies, one on tape, one on our master drive, and then when we know we've got 2 copies, we actually delete and start recycling. So we've got our master drive, which is a nearline drive. Then we transcode to a low resolution because we have storage. We have, we work with Avid Unity in-house. We have a limit on how much storage we've got, and therefore we work at low resolution in offline with our full res audio. But what we do at the same time, we have some software called Foreseen from Forbidden Technologies, and it's a online viewing, editing, logging system. So as we put everything onto our Unity, everything automatically, just like magic, goes up onto the Foreseen website, which is a password protected. You can, put security levels on it for, data protection, and it allows teams anywhere. So whether they're anywhere in the world, at home, in the office, anywhere with an internet connection, they go in, they can watch the footage, they can log the footage, and they can even start sync pulling, so they can get prepared for the edit. And all you do is take the EDL from your sync pulls into either an Avid or a Final Cut Pro. So we're working in Avid on Embarrassing Bodies, so we go into an offline with all our media, maybe take some of the sync pulls from what the team have been using Foreseen for. We go into an offline, we picture lock, and then we do a data relink of the final lock sequence to the media that's on our nearline storage, do our sync check, and go through post in the same way that we would have done if it was SD. So we just go through grade, online, dub, deliverables. The only difference is obviously working HD. So I'm just going to run through some little tips because I've rushed through that a little bit. My second tip is the communication at the start. So I have mentioned this already, but I'll mention it again. Getting the whole team together as early as you possibly can. And by the whole team, I mean pull in, if you can, get your editors there, get your post-production team there, or your post-house there, right at the very start. Your researchers. Everyone's going to be on location, your production managers, and just get everyone together to really, really understand what that workflow is and have everybody understand what you're doing. We offer training as compulsory at Maverick, and that's just because we had a lot of people coming in saying, I've done tapes before, I know what I'm doing, and then they'll go out and we'll find that maybe they didn't quite know what they were doing, and yes, we have also come very close to losing media that way too. So we make sure that we offer the training current against the workflow that we've decided, and make sure that everybody knows exactly what they're doing before they go out, even if they say they already know. We do test shoots so that we can agree the settings that we're going to do. One thing I would say about the Canon 305 is that it's not particularly great in low light situations, and because we choose to shoot progressive, the low light issue becomes even more of an issue. So playing around with our shutter speeds and looking at what extra lighting the teams need has been really, really important. So we do our test shoots, get everyone reassured that they know what they're doing. Another thing I would say is we have in the past had a lot of maybe researchers, APs, maybe even PDs, that can probably get away with shooting a little bit soft on a Z1 that you now can't really get away with in a HD world, just because everything's got so much more detail. And so what's really great is when we send our teams on the test days, we get them to shoot in HD and watch back their footage on a HD monitor, and so that they can actually start to check that what they're going out filming is the standard of which we need it to be for the main production. We talked through the company procedures, so things like these boxes here. What I would say is that, you know, the reason that we use these boxes is because we've had near misses where media has been carried, put in people's pockets, and, you know, they can get lost. They're very small cards. We don't want them getting lost, not only because they cost about £90 each, but way more important, they contain media that is really, really sensitive. We don't want to lose it because obviously it's a day's footage that we would, you know, an hour's footage or whatever that we would have lost, but also because of the content that's on those cards. And so we don't want to be carrying those around in anything that isn't bright yellow or bright orange and looks like Bob the Builder's lunchbox. So that's a real Maverick procedure for us. Things like banning the proxies. You know, we want to say to people when they're out and the cameraman goes, I've got this really great idea, why don't I put it on a little stick for you? PD thinks, oh, that sounds great, I can start logging. We want to be able to communicate to everyone at the start why we don't do that, and it's because of our procedures and our data protection. And then finally, talk through production-specific details. So the one thing I did say is that every production at Maverick is treated now very uniquely. Once upon a time in tape, we just kind of did the same thing regardless, really, for productions. It was like, right, this is what we're shooting on, go off, do it, come back. There are lots of different needs on productions. There may be specialist cameras that teams might want to use, or workflows that, you know, some teams, Embarassing Bodies actually will be going to shoot in Thailand next month, and we do need to tweak that workflow a little bit because they will have to be downloading on location. So it's like looking at the different things on a production and tailoring it towards what they're going to need to do. So tip 3, take the pressure off the team. So I've kind of said that already as well. What's really important for us is that when teams go out, they're really, really busy. There's not enough time in the day as it is. And the last thing they want to be doing and worrying about is the media that they've got and needing to, certainly for, you know, the compact flash, or if you're shooting on the S/S cards, that you're going to need to be constantly deleting and then to be able to shoot more material. So if we have to download in the field, which we do have to do occasionally, we make sure that our teams go out with the most efficient resources to enable that download time to be as quick as possible. So when we first started doing this, we got all the office laptops that the producers had, and we got some little memory adapters, and we put them in and we hooked up a drive. And we timed how long it took to download an hour's worth of media, and it took us about an hour. Possibly a little bit longer than that, actually. Everything was so slow. And then with a bit of research, we found out it's because we just didn't have the right laptop speeds. You know, the adapter wasn't great. We weren't using the fastest drive. And so with a little bit of thought, and probably only cost us about £500, which wasn't excessive, we bought laptops with the PCI Express card slots. We put in eStarter drives, and we got that time from an hour down to about something like 14 minutes. And so that meant that teams could go out, and actually only took them 1 hour to back up 4 hours worth of footage, which sometimes was their whole day's worth of footage. So it's making sure that if you do have to do it, you put the time and thought into getting it as quick and efficient as possible. Designate clear responsibility for downloading. So again, if you're having to do this in the field, you want to make sure you get the right person to do that. And a big decision for us at Maverick at the beginning was, well, who is that person going to be? Because some people instantly said it's got to be the producer director. They're the most senior person on location. But then they're also probably the busiest person on location, who's got 101 things to worry about anyway. So some people felt, well, it should be the runner. But then you don't necessarily want the runner to be doing that, because they're the lowest paid person on the production, who will be given something that is probably the most responsible thing, because then you don't want to lose your media. So we had to look at whether we compromise that and whether we just got, say, location assistants to do it, that it was built into their schedule, that they would be responsible for it. They knew it was their responsibility, and they had the training right at the start. And we actually recruited those people in mind with the fact that they'd need to have a high level of attention to detail, and were quite tech savvy. So a lot of thought into whose responsibility that should be, and also to give them a good system. So make sure that person goes out knowing what they're doing, they've got all the logs that they need, they've got the right equipment. Just make sure that they go knowing exactly what they're doing so that basically you're minimising any mistakes happening on location. Allowing enough cars for a full day and a little bit more. I would say that the last thing you want to do is send a team out with just enough media for the day. If they slightly overrun, if they get back to the hotel and they're absolutely knackered at the end of the night, but they've got to get up early and go out shooting again, just give them a little bit more grace. Give them like 2 days worth of recording media if you can, or at least 1.5 days, so that teams go out and feel that they've just got that pressure taken off and they've got enough media to just see them through if they don't get a chance every day to back that media up. And planning labelling before the shoot. So get yourself, one thing that we do is we make sure that every clip that we shoot has got the producer director's initial on it, very, very minimum, and that we give them all numbering systems so that when the media comes back, we can always identify what production it's been shot for, what producer director actually shot it, just to give us as much organisation in post-production as we possibly can. Tip 4, data and commercial protection. I kind of mentioned this as well before, but it's really important for us. Consider how cars are transported. So the reason we use those big bright boxes is just so that people have that mental kind of idea that this is my precious rushes. And when we first started shooting Tapeless, the idea of people carrying very small compact flashcards around in their pocket, it did mean that occasionally everyone's like, where's that compact flashcard gone? And it ended up in a washing machine. So that's how important it is to consider protecting and having something that when you've got a change of mentality with the idea of not having tape anymore, that you've got something bright and obvious and bold so that nobody loses it or forgets where it is. Same with drives. We make sure when we take drives out, if we're downloading and putting them on drives, we make sure we carry those around in cases as well. The other thing we do, I can't find it now, but these have got like little holes, so we've got little padlocks. Can't find it, but anyway, we've got little combination code padlocks so nobody can lose a key, where we keep these locked just so that if it did get lost or anything like that, they're not easy for people to just open and take the cards out. Handle proxy sticks with care. So yeah, I've shown you that tiny little proxy stick, which I've lost because it's so small. So with these, if we do have to use them, we have a system where we actually get the media off this as quickly as possible and onto an encrypted memory stick for our PDs to actually log from, so that any media stays on this for the minimum amount of time and definitely gets deleted. I'll go very quickly back to these cards actually. If you're hiring cards, make sure that you delete it before you send it back to your hire company. Again, early days of Tapeless for us saw we sent our media to a post house where they were getting the media off the cards, assuring us that they deleted the cards afterwards, and then we sent them back to kit hire companies, and again, all our media was on those cards. So just... yeah, we have a different system in place now that makes sure that those cards are definitely wiped before we send it back to somebody else. And keep track of all your media. So, I mean, being far-based, it's great. You know, you can send copies of your media as far as you can be making multiple copies. It's, you know, we do that anyway. You're encouraged to make more than one copy. But then that also means that your media can be in 10 different places if you're not careful, and you may actually lose track of where that all is. And so, again, to make sure that you really think through where your media is going, keep a log of how many copies you've got and who's responsible for them. And then when you don't need those copies anymore, get rid of them. Tip 5 is post-production. So a big thing for us, probably less of a problem now than it was a year ago when we started having to do all of this, is using a post facility that has got experience doing this so that you're not going to be their guinea pig, and making sure that you sit down with them and they can demonstrate that they have a really well thought out system for you, so that you're confident that they understand, or that you know how your media is going to be handled, who's going to be making the backups, where are the backups going to be, who's making your long-term archive, etc. etc. And if they do want to charge you for storage, because we've had that before, consider purchasing your own drives, because you may find out that you could probably buy the drive for what they're hiring it to you for, and then you've got that drive to use for future productions. Check your delivery format. Again, this may not be so much of an issue in a year or two when people say we're going to go tapeless delivery, or perhaps everything's going to be standard HD Cam SR. But certainly right now, some broadcasters are accepting HD Cam instead of HD Cam SR. I don't know if that's just because of this recent stock crisis, or whether that's just something that some broadcasters will accept for a little while longer. And if you can get away with HD Cam, it is a little bit cheaper, which will help for your budget as well. And then consider long-term archiving of your media. So I said earlier that our second copy is always on LTO tape. And that's really great for us because it means that we can then put that tape on the shelf. It's really cheap. That tape costs about £50 and holds something like 1 terabyte of media for us, or something like that. So it's a really great way at the end of a series, instead of having a whole shelf or a whole cupboard full of rushes, we might only have 5 tapes sitting on a shelf, and therefore we're not having to pay warehouses to hold it for us. And we can also make 2 copies. You know, we have made copies of our RTO so that we can keep our rushes in 2 different locations, which, you know, helps our business continuity as much as anything else. Only thing I would say about RTO is just think about how you would ever retrieve that media back if you needed to. It's not the same as tape, where you can just, you know, pop it in a deck and just take off a little bit of media. We have had some problems with restoring when we've had to need to go back to getting it off LTO. But it is possible, but just have a think about that right at the start. And then my very final tip is making the most of the new technologies. So one thing, it's very scary, you know, the idea of, for us, we were going HD and tapeless in one fell swoop. And there's a lot of people, even now at Maverick, even though everything we do is tapeless, still a bit of fear. There's a lot of, you know, Chinese whispers and horror stories out there about losing media. Not that we've actually ever lost anything. We've come really close, but we haven't lost anything yet. So really just, you know, get people reassured and then embrace the change. Look at the benefits that you have got. Our footage now looks amazing. You know, the actual final look of our programmes looks so much better than anything that we ever shot SD. And it's really enabled us to rethink how we work our productions, bringing together post-production teams with production teams, getting people talking, building those relationships and that communication. It's made us shape up things like our data protection. I mean, I was saying yesterday how we probably wouldn't have thought anything of making a DVD copy of our footage on the first series of Embarrassing Bodies. And when you think about it now, like a DVD that, you know, someone will watch and then throw out in the rubbish or leave on the shelf, whereas now we've really thought about it, and, you know, that footage is going nowhere to anybody that shouldn't see it. So it has enabled us to rethink that through, rethink through training. So a lot of our teams have got better at kind of camera training now. And edit prep, so looking at new technologies like full scene, where we're actually even saving our offline edit time by being able to sync pull before we even go into the edit. And we've also maximised cost savings. We've actually saved now. We don't have to have real-time transfers from DV cam onto DVD because we use full scene. It's a hell of a lot cheaper for us than doing those transfers. Sync pulling, again, it's saved us offline time, which has also saved us a week of an offline editor. And we get to reuse media. You know, once we've paid for stock on one series, we don't have to pay for it on the next series because we've already bought it. But we can still put that in as a recharge back to in our budgets to the broadcaster and make a bit of, you know, something for your production company. And I'm sure there's probably lots of other benefits of going tapeless, but those were just a few that, you know, to really embrace and maximise. And that's it. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions.